Last month you said drilling results at Wafi-Golpu, which year and a half of, were spectacular. Highest mineralization values to date. Is that still the story? What have you been telling the media today?
Yeah, Stephen, it was interesting because I was really just telling the media what we've got in Papua New Guinea, a little bit of the history, a little bit of the indicators. So giving them a broad overview of what the sort of mineralization looks like here. And therefore they're able to interpret a little bit more on what, so I gave them a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe a lesson, if you like, in sort of geology of that area, which just makes them better informed. So one doesn't take these things out of context. So you see this geology, you see a result, you can actually see a little bit more once you know that.
Well, everyone seems to be getting really excited by Wafi-Golpu. Yeah. So tell us what actually is there.
Well, you know, the problem with these copper porphyries is we don't really know because we don't drill it out completely. You know, if you go back to looking at copper porphyries, they typically happen in these regions, you know, up through South America, on these plate boundaries, down through Papua New Guinea, Philippines, and Indonesia, and so on. So that's typically where they occur. But if you look at the history of them, you know, some of them were discovered many moons ago, and later on more deposits were found. If you look at Grasberg, which is simply the biggest gold mine in the world, it's a copper and gold mine, but it's the biggest gold mine in the world. Really, they only discovered the Grasberg deposit 30 years after they discovered the Erzberg deposit. So, you know, there's quite complexities in these things.
You've already been mining at Hidden Valley. That's also Papua New Guinea,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
And how is production lifting off over there?
Well, it's you know, we really opened the mine in September. It's been starting to lift, but it's a case of getting all the teething problems out of it. And our biggest issue right now is actually delivering ore to the plant. So we've been able to get into the ore body. We've got multiple faces now that we can actually mine in that open pit, and now it's a case of really sorting out the crushers and the transferring of the ore through basically a 5-kilometer conveyor system into the plant. The plant, a lot of the issues have been sorted out. So we're really doing better, but we're not there yet.
Infrastructure constraints in Papua New Guinea, do you have to put in a lot of infrastructure? What's electricity like, water like, and road infrastructure? Yeah,
you have to put a lot of infrastructure. You know, road access is difficult. You have to be able to build roads. Electricity, we have a system there where we generate our own electricity. The long term is that we bring in hydropower via the national provider. That is starting to get up, so they're supplying us some electricity. But yes, in Papua New Guinea, you've got mountainous regions, you have to provide a lot of your own infrastructure.
Now, I've got no idea where Wafi-Golpu lies in relation to Hidden Valley, but can you share any of the infrastructure? So any of the infrastructure you're putting in for Hidden Valley, will that be used for Wafi-Golpu as well? Yeah,
Wafi-Golpu is actually ideally situated. It's about 70 kilometers from the biggest port city in Papua New Guinea, which is called Lae. So it's in a much lower region. Hidden Valley is up in the region of about 2,500 meters above sea level, whereas Wafi-Golpu is about 500. So very much flatter, very much more accessible, very much closer to infrastructure. It's probably, you couldn't wish for a better location for a new mine.
Now, you're really only expecting final results from your testing there at the end of this year, but I mean, you seem to be revising upwards your estimates of what's actually below the ground there and how quickly you're going to get it out of the ground.
Yeah, I guess, you know, it's a process where, you know, you don't know quite how big this thing is, and we're going through the pre-feasibility study now. That will firm up a lot of figures. But we're also doing a lot of drilling. So we're bringing in 3 more drilling rigs. The drilling rigs we got there have been had a capacity of about 2,000 meters. So we've been able to get much deeper, but we're bringing more to drilling rigs. Because as we've been stepping out, we've been finding more. And that's a bit of a frustration from some point. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's frustrating because you can't actually close that sort of chapter and say, okay, this is the size of the thing. But we'll know much better towards the end of the year.
Well, I mean, we've seen a bit of a re-rating in your share price recently, sparked, of course, by reports coming out of RBC in London saying that this deposit is fantastic and it could really make you a more lucrative company and also open to perhaps a takeover. Yeah. Any corporate activity on the cards here?
No, there's nothing like that, Stephen. I mean, obviously it's a good talking point and it's very newsworthy, but any company that's got good assets that's undervalued would be a subject of that discussion. But there's absolutely there's no truth to it here.
But the Papua New Guinea deposits do put you into a different league of gold producers, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's a big deposit. It's simply one of the highest grade copper and gold deposits around, and it's growing in size. So at the moment, Golpu itself is only 500 million tons, but it's probably going to grow closer towards 750 or so during the next declaration, which will be in probably end of June into July. We'll declare those results. So it's a big deposit and it's growing.